Hey there, it's Sarah, and I gotta be real with you. Summer break is throwing me for a loop with my schedule. So this week, I am bringing you a replay of one of my most downloaded episodes from this year. It's where I sat down and interviewed my friend Chelsea Bohnstedt. People really resonated with Chelsea's story, so I'm really excited for you to listen to this replay. If you have found yourself having such a hard time starting your alcohol-free journey and allowing it to stick, this story is going to resonate with you. Enjoy this episode, and next week I'll be back with a brand new interview episode. Welcome to episode 145 of the No More Wasted Days podcast. I'm your host, Sarah, and I have such a special show planned for you today. Today we get to talk to my very good friend, Chelsea Bohnstedt, who is a yoga instructor and also a sound healer. And if you don't know what a sound healer is, it's somebody who facilitates sound baths. And I actually got to be a part of one of Chelsea's sound baths at my own house when we had our Sober Tahoe reunion this past summer, and I hosted it at my house. So Chelsea had her sound bowls with her, and we said, will you do a sound bath on our deck? And she did, and it was amazing. And it was the first sound bath for me where I did not cry the whole way through it, because the first sound bath I ever attended was actually in Tahoe at the Sober Adventure Retreat where Chelsea and I met. Now, in this episode, I actually talk a little bit about this, but I don't give the full story, so I'm going to give it to you here. Something cracked open. I talk a lot to people about finding unique ways to do self-care or finding unique ways to get in touch with yourself on your alcohol-free journey. And I was so excited to try a sound bath because I was pretty sure I was going to have a spiritual experience, and I did. I drew a card that actually said, your spirit guides are always with you as long as you're listening. Now, I can't remember if that was the exact words, but it was something like that. And if you've listened to me before, you know that I had a hard time finding a spiritual path on my alcohol-free journey. It's one of the reasons I was very resistant about AA. And I was like, maybe this is a piece I need. Now, during that sound bath, it was like all my spirit guides came to see me, which can be overwhelming when your spirit guides happen to be your grandma and you feel like she is right there with you again and you haven't seen her for the longest time. And then the imagery of my dog that had passed away about 6 months ago kept coming up in that sound bath. And it's like my dog was saying, I'm okay, but are you okay? I'm worried about you. And I was able to connect with her through that sound bath. Now, I know this may be feeling all very woo-woo, and you're like, where are you going with this, Sarah? But I just have to say that this moment, although uncomfortable for me, was very cathartic because I had forgotten to grieve my dog. I had forgotten to manage those emotions, and this sound bath gave me the space to do it. And that is exactly what happens with sound healing. And that's why I'm so excited for you to meet Chelsea in this episode. Now, we don't just talk about sound baths. That actually comes later in the episode. You get to hear Chelsea's story of quitting drinking. And when we recorded this episode, she was 562 days alcohol-free. So she's about 1.5 years into her alcohol-free journey. And her journey took a little while to take off. She had many starts and stops. So if you are a person who has had a lot of starts and stops and you're wondering, am I ever going to find my path? Am I ever going to find my way? I'm so excited for you to hear Chelsea's story because, yes, you really are going to find your way as long as you keep coming back to it. And I think when you listen to Chelsea's story, you're going to feel very empowered to start this journey and find your way. So enough of me talking. Let's dive into this episode. And before we dive all the way into this episode, I want to make sure that you check out the links in the show notes of this episode so you can follow Chelsea on social media and also so you can check out the links where you can take online yoga classes with Chelsea as well. So if you are feeling connected to her, you can keep that connection going after this episode. Welcome to the podcast, Chelsea. Thank you so much for being on.
Thank you for having me.
And if you don't know, Chelsea and I met at the Sober Tahoe reunion that we did back in 2024. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. And was it the time of your life when we did that reunion? No, not the reunion, but the actual retreat.
Both were a blast. The trip was great. The reunion was fun.
I know. And how far along were you on the retreat at the first one?
I think maybe about 6 months.
Oh, wow. See, I thought you were a little bit farther. I was like, "Oh, I think Chelsea was about 1 year." But, yeah, so I got to meet Chelsea at the Sober Tahoe Retreat, and I know I talk about this retreat a lot, but if you are on an alcohol-free journey, I highly urge you to go on one of these types of retreats. Find the person that really speaks to you and find the adventure that speaks to you and go do it, because there's retreats where you go out and have, like, a cozy time in a cabin, and then there's retreats like we did where we were out hiking and boating and kayaking and doing all the things. So find the one, and I cannot recommend your Sober Pal retreats enough. So check out
Agreed.
Laura. I feel like I'll always link Laura, and I always tell the people in my Day Makers community, like, if you like me, you're going to like Laura. So you should definitely check out her retreats. But we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about Chelsea. And just so everybody can get to know you, we're going to talk all about your alcohol free story first. So, before you started your alcohol free journey, what did your relationship with alcohol look like? And was there a specific turning point that made you realize, like, something's got to change? Enough is enough.
I think my journey, I mean, it probably looked like a lot of people's for the longest time, especially, you go through college and alcohol is just always there. I think where it really started to shift was during COVID, during that lockdown period. I know a lot of people struggled with alcohol. I mean, everything was closed, but the liquor store was open. It was just a really challenging time. There wasn't as much accountability. I think socially a lot more like day drinking was acceptable, and so it really kind of shifted for me there. And a lot of it coincided with the passing of my mom, which had happened like 3 or so months before lockdown.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, just a lot kind of happening all at once that was difficult. And so it really progressively increased. And I think there was always a part of me deep down at that point that knew that it was something that I needed to change. I remember like Googling, am I an alcoholic?
Oh,
And
yeah.
it was one of the, it could be a list of 100 things. And so long as there was one that didn't apply to me, I was like, okay, I'm safe.
Yeah. Oh, thank
Um,
goodness. It's not me. That was so me too. And I'm like, I laugh about it now, but I'm like, oh my gosh.
it's horrible. Yeah. I would just ignore the 99 things that described me to a T, so long as there
Yeah.
was one. But it started to kind of progressively get worse from there. I think I had this small inner voice that really wanted to quit. I just wasn't giving it enough power. So I'd string together a couple weeks and maybe a month, and it just became kind of this cyclical thing until it really started to affect my health and my relationships and my work, to the point where I almost didn't have a choice. It was either, stop drinking, or that's kind of it. End of story.
Yeah.
Let the credits roll.
Yeah.
So it was kind of a fast and furious descent for me, but it is really powerful to realize, your life is in your hands if you don't make a
Yeah.
change.
It really is, and it's hard to see it coming when you're stuck in the cycle, and I know for me, I didn't admit I had a drinking problem until I was, like, 2 years alcohol-free. I was like, "Oh, yeah, I think I had a problem." I'm like, "Oh my god." So, I always commend people that can, like, say it beforehand. I'm like, "Oh, wow." Like, it took me I was just like, "No, that's not me. I'm just a person who quit. Like, how good for me." And then I was like, "Oh, wait, no." I finally could look at all those things about alcoholics and go, "Oh, yeah." And just so everybody knows, there is something on there where it says, like, if you answered yes to one of these, that's enough. And it's like, "Oh, okay."
Yeah, we glossed over that.
Yeah, I was like, "Oh, okay." I totally you just wanna there's something that they call it, and it'll come to me later, but you find the truth that you wanna find in those things. So,
Hmm.
after your first attempts to quit, because I know you started and you stopped and started and you stopped, what was different the time that it finally stuck? Was it just that true I don't wanna say rock bottom, but I mean, that's kinda where it was. Was it just the true rock bottom for you?
I mean, that was a big part of it. So the last time before I did finally quit, I ended up in the hospital for quite some time. I had some pretty severe withdrawals that were pretty dangerous to my health and well-being. And it was, I remember during kind of one of the lucid moments that I had in the hospital, just kind of laying in bed, and I would have given anything for the boring, like, I go to bed at 8 p.m. and wake up at 5, and I don't do anything exciting. Like, all the things that I complained about in my first go around of sobriety, I was like, I would kill to have this back right now. And just kind of that moment of realizing like how close you are. It really, that was my big motivator, was realizing like, oh, all of these warnings and people's stories about how dangerous this can get, like it's not just fairy tales, like it's a real thing. So that was a pretty big motivator. But I think a lot of it too, I was more actively involved in my recovery. I think it's easy to kind of passively be in recovery.
Yeah.
You might go to the meetings or read the right books, but I feel like throwing yourself 110% into it, really, something about that just kind of shifts, I don't know, the way that everything feels.
Oh, yeah. And there is the definite shift. Everybody always talks about that. Even people in my community will say, this time feels different. And I remember feeling that way. Like this time actually feels like I'm serious and I'm doing this work. What did you do? I know you did SMART Recovery. Did you go to AA meetings as well? Because I always love to hear those stories, because I was one of those outliers that was like, oh, I'm not going to go. I was so scared of a meeting that's one of the ways I got myself to
Yeah.
quit. Like if you can quit on your own.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I avoided it even before things kind of got to a point where I did end up going through rehab. And in rehab, it's typically an AA format for a lot of things. So you are encouraged to kind of do like 90 meetings in 90 days when you get out and those sorts of things. But it was really hard for AA to resonate with me. I think I already felt enough guilt and shame. I really didn't need any more. And that's just sort of what it dredged up for me. I know that's not true for everybody, but for me,
Yeah.
that was just really difficult for me. It also just was a lot of older people I couldn't really identify with, and just with religious trauma background, I just didn't identify with it. I know it can be higher power, but it was still just really hard for me to reconcile. So I did SMART Recovery, and I know that they have online meetings that you can join just nationally on Zoom. You can find them on the website, but we were fortunate enough to have 2 meetings a week here in town. And SMART Recovery, for those who don't know, is more self-empowerment based. So it's based on cognitive behavioral therapy. And for me, maybe I have a psychology background, so I think it just clicked for me. It was like, oh, okay, if I change the way that I think, I can change my behavior. I can make sense of all of this. I'm in control.
Yeah.
And I feel like I found a little bit more community there as well. So that was really helpful for me. And then I also found a program called Y12SR. It's yoga for 12-step recovery. So it's a combination of a meeting. It's based on the principles of AA. I think a lot of the Y12SR meetings or classes that I've been to have been a little bit more lax in that. It's just sort of the philosophy is kind of the underpinning. And then there's some gentle yoga to kind of meld the two together to kind of have it be a somatic experience. So that was really helpful too, to have that community.
I love
Especially
that.
as a woman.
Yeah, I was going to say both of those sound like something I had no idea those existed before I met. Well, I knew Smart Recovery existed before I met you, but not the what is it? YS12?
Y12SR.
Y12SR. Okay, I will definitely have to put that in the link of the show notes, because I feel like the religious trauma piece, like I was like, I'm not going to go to somewhere where they're going to make me say a prayer.
Yeah.
Like
I was
that's
like, I don't
not
even know the prayer.
Yeah, no, I knew the prayer because it's like I was raised Catholic, and I was like, no, it's actually hanging in my mom's house. I'll walk by and I'll be like, oh, there's the serenity prayer.
Yeah.
And I'll be like, huh, all right. It's like, which we will definitely dive into. But so you're a year and a half sober now, or are you 2?
Yes.
She's checking her app right
I
now.
am. I'm checking my app right now because I had 500 days on our reunion trip.
I knew you had a thing in our trip, and I was like, wasn't it 2 years?
Yeah, 500 days. So we're 562.
That's
Wow, it's been
awesome.
62 days since I've seen you.
I know. I keep being like, uh-oh, we better plan another reunion. Let's have one every 2 months. That's not
That
too
sounds
much,
great.
right? So now that you're 562 days alcohol free, what are some of the biggest shifts that you've experienced? You can talk about mentally, emotionally, or spiritually, just the biggest thing that stands out to you.
I think, I mean, it's hard to pick just one because, well, as you know, like everything in your life shifts often for the better. But I think for me, a lot of it has to do with just the peace that I found.
Yeah.
So for the first time, after my experience in the hospital, when I really decided to take my recovery seriously, I also finally kind of listened to my doctor when he was like, I think you might have anxiety, and started taking medication for anxiety. And it was just this like full circle moment of, oh my gosh, you don't always have this voice in your head telling you, but everything's going to go wrong, right? You better be prepared for everything, So just getting rid of that mental chatter, being able to work with a therapist and really just feel like for the first time I have both feet firmly on the ground. That was something that, just felt so far out of reach when I was drinking, or even in my attempts, to kind of go through that cycle of trying to quit and falling off the wagon and that sort of thing. My baseline just completely shifted. It's just nice and even. And that was, I don't know, that peace and tranquility. I feel like that's what I was always looking for when I was drinking, was just for my mind to quiet, for my body to slow down. And it's like, oh, it was there all along. I just had to find it.
Isn't that crazy too, that we live in such a world of chaos as drinkers? And it turns out that all we were looking for was that peace. And I was even looking at my own life and kind of recording things for social media, being like, my life is so boring. And just, because you're trying to make it look really cool. And I was like, oh my God, people must be like, I don't want to do this. This just looks real boring. And I was like, I love it so much. Like, I love that on a Friday night, I play a board game with my kids or just chill and watch a movie. And I love that I go to bed at 9:30. It's like, and Chelsea's got me beat on that, everybody. It's like,
I do. I'm usually in bed I do read before bed, but 7:30, 8 o'clock, it's not unusual for me to be in bed.
Yeah. I'm like, I read before bed, but it's only about like 3 minutes and then I fall asleep. So, I'm finishing like 3 books a year where.
Yeah, I hit 135 for the year.
Yeah, that's amazing.
So if you get sober, you too can read 135 books a year.
Yeah, or 3.
Or 3. Or none. No, I totally agree with what you're saying. And I think a lot of people, I joke with friends, who still drink and about my boring life. I'm like, oh, I go to bed at 8 o'clock and I eat well and, do all of these boring things. And I find that a lot of them actually are jealous. They're like, I wish I could incorporate some of that into my life. So even though we joke about it being boring, it's actually kind of
amazing,
lucrative. Yeah.
Yeah, I love it so much. And that's totally what I was like, well, I have to just convey how much I love my boring life. And I was like, yeah, there we go. It's really fantastic. That boring can be cool. I'm trying to figure out how I can make that my new rebellion. Like, taking care of yourself is the most rebellious thing you can do, especially as a woman. So I'm just like, ooh, I love talking to my fellow boring baddies. And I mean that in the most loving way.
It like I said, it was those very just mundane, boring things that I missed the most when I, was in the hospital. It wasn't anything like that you might think, those big picture, life-altering things. It was like, I miss walking my dog.
Yeah. And not feeling like you're going to die while you're doing it. And
yeah.
It's like, yeah, those things are awesome now. So one thing, and you haven't called it this yet, but you said something at the retreat where I was like, I've never heard that term. And you talked about something called kindling, which happens when you start and stop so many times. Can you explain that in like the simplest terms for the listener?
Yes.
Here you go. You're our professional because it happened. It was your experience.
Did, yeah. And it was something that I knew that alcohol withdrawal could be dangerous, but I didn't realize that kindling was a thing until after I had gone through it and it had been explained to me. And it's called kindling because, kind of like when you have a fire, you throw little sticks and twigs and little pieces of kindling in it, and that keeps those embers kind of lit. And so your brain in this instance is like that fire pit. Every time you stop drinking, it throws a little bit of kindling in the fire because your brain's always just trying to, keep the status quo. It's like, you're throwing a lot at me, so I'm just going to try to balance out what's going on here. So every time you quit, it's a little bit more kindling in the fire, and it keeps those embers burning enough to where it does not take much for a fire to start again. So really, when you quit and start again and keep doing that over time, your brain is just in such an excitatory state that you start to have really severe symptoms, and that can even lead to seizures. It can lead to, sometimes in severe cases, cardiac arrest, coma, stroke. It can get very serious very, very quickly.
Yeah.
Just because you're kind of keeping that fire very well tended, even though you think you're doing a good thing by, taking a break.
Because you're taking those breaks and
yeah. The brain takes a long time for it to figure out equilibrium again. So it's actually really dangerous to do.
Yeah. I'm so glad you're able to talk about it because it's something that I've talked now that I've met you and I'd heard your story. I've been able to talk to other people who do say, well, it feels like it's just getting harder and harder every time I start and stop. And I'm like, it's because it is.
Hmm.
And like it is just kind of well, this time almost feels like the withdrawals are the worst. And I'm like, they're gonna keep getting worse and worse.
Yep.
And and I never want to scare people. Like that's not my intention, but I also think knowledge is power. And knowing this can be the thing that goes, okay, well, then it's time. If I'm trying over and over, there's this huge part of me that wants this to end. So let's really take this knowledge, be empowered, and make this the final stopping point. So for you personally, what were your withdrawal symptoms that got worse and worse, if you don't mind sharing?
Yeah, I feel like kind of much like with my drinking, it was just very exponential. I think most people have probably experienced those tremors and shakes, and maybe even I've kind of made this joke a couple of times when I've given talks here in town. When you're trying to fall asleep and you're just on the edge, and then your body kind of does that like spasm. Some things like that. Just my muscles just couldn't relax because my brain was in such an excited state. And I remember, when that happened, thinking like, oh boy, I might have a problem because I'm actually physically starting to experience withdrawals. But then it just started getting more and more intense and lasting a little bit longer until, my gosh, I don't know how many times I had gone through the cycle, but it would get to the point where I would start experiencing withdrawal symptoms like while I was still drinking.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
just because, your brain is just trying so hard to keep up that the amount of alcohol that I had to consume just to like hit baseline was already a lot. So it did get to a point a couple of times where I did have a couple of seizures. And I know that that was something when I was looking at the delirium tremens, like list of potential symptoms that you could experience. That was another thing I would look at and be like, well, I haven't had that and I haven't had that. So I think I'm still doing okay. I don't need to talk to my doctor. It's just shakes. It'll go away in a couple days.
Yeah.
Until it did. And there
Yeah.
was really no warning sign besides just, my withdrawals felt particularly difficult. It was hard to walk just because I was so like unsteady and shaky and had so much anxiety, had a hard time breathing. But I mean, it sneaks up on you really fast. So for me, I did have a few seizures, unfortunately. Fortunately, realized, it was kind of time to stop. But I will say, just kind of my public service announcement, if people are thinking that they might be experiencing some of this and they're thinking about kindling and maybe worried about some of those severe symptoms, to please talk to your doctor. There are medications that they can provide to taper you off safely so that you don't experience seizures or
Yeah.
any of the potentially life-threatening
Yeah. And it can feel
withdrawal
really
symptoms.
embarrassing or, gosh, not even embarrassing, it's shameful to talk to a doctor about it, is what I think most people are like, well, I don't want to do that. I know some lady on the internet said I should, but they've heard it all. Like, that's what I always
Yeah.
tell people. Doctors have heard way more than your story. And they've heard the crazy things that you watch on like The Pit. They've been there. So you coming in saying, "Hey, I need to quit and I'm really worried about withdrawals and these are the things that I've already experienced." They're going to be like, "Oh, okay." They're going to be like, "What a nice easy patient this was today."
Yeah.
Instead of being the person who waits and tries to go at it alone. So I always urge people, if you're trying to quit and it feels way too scary with withdrawals, that's your sign. Go see a doctor, go to an urgent care, figure it
Hmm.
out. It's worth it, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I unfortunately had to make that statement to several doctors through the course of my recovery before it finally stuck. And I can
Yeah.
say every single one was just so supportive and so happy to, be part of something so big and positive. I've heard stories where doctors have not been as supportive, but I've been fortunate to not have that experience. I even wrote the doctor who treated me in the ER a card on my 1 year anniversary, just thanking him for kind of the really supportive and kind words that he had for me when
That's
I
so
was at a really
awesome.
low point. So it's
Yeah.
scary, but then I feel like every time I told the doctor I think I have a problem with drinking and I want to quit, they were my biggest cheerleaders.
Yeah. And I think that's what people need to remember. Like for doctors to help somebody transform in that way, that's a huge thing. And it's not something that gets to happen a lot for them. So I understand the shame. I understand the embarrassment you may feel, but it's going to be worth it. Now you get to hear Chelsea be proof, and she's seriously such an amazing person. And it is like, I feel like sometimes we think, oh, if I'm a person who has to go to the doctor to quit, that means I'm the level of, like, Frank on Shameless. Like, if you
Mm-hmm.
watch that show, and it is like, I'm not the equivalent of that. And I know that's how I was. And so that was that shame space. But I want you to see somebody instead like Chelsea, who is successful in her job and has many like different startup businesses that she does and so many amazing hobbies, and realize like, oh, okay, Chelsea's just like me, a normal human being, not this character that I've created in my head. So I really love that you're able to share it, because I think it's something that's really empowering to somebody who may be very frightened at this point. So
Yeah,
thank
it's
you.
hard to see kind of when you take inventory of where you're at, there's always something that's like, well, I'm not that bad because, fill in the blank. But if you're questioning your relationship with alcohol, then I think that's reason enough. You don't need to be, losing jobs or, it is really severe for this to be, a
Yeah.
problem for you.
Yeah. And one thing we'll say sometimes in the day makers is, I hadn't lost my job yet. I hadn't ruined my marriage yet, because I could look and other people can look at their drinking, and you hit all those yets at some point. So you just keep going. And that was kind of my sign. I'm like, oh, this is like I think it was in This Naked Mind, and Annie Grace was talking about how it's progressive. And I was like, oh, that
Yep.
makes sense. Like this, yeah, it is taking me more to get drunk, taking me more to get a buzz. And it is like I'm hitting all those little check marks. And I was like, I don't want to hit the check marks where I lose my job, or my husband's like, this is enough. You got to figure this out. Like, I was like, I don't want those. So you start to kind of see like the only place up going is up, and it's not the place you want to go with your drinking.
Yeah.
And so, all right, we're going to change gears a little bit. And
Okay.
you talked about this a little bit. So when I asked Chelsea, will you do this? And at first I was like, and will you talk about kindling? And then I was like, oh, and will you also talk about spirituality through sobriety? Because many of us from our Sober Tahoe Baddie group talk about our religious trauma and how we didn't want to go to AA because, oh my gosh, they were going to make us say a group prayer. And that felt very like going to youth group in middle school and going, oh God. And it was just like, okay, this is not for me. But one thing I know about Chelsea is she does a lot of things in the spiritual space. Now, I don't actually know what your path of spirituality is, or so how did you find, I know that you must have a spiritual path of some sort because of everything you do. So how did you find a spiritual path that felt authentic to you?
I think some of it was just putting myself out there. It was a little bit of trial and error. I knew I wasn't looking for anything really church related. I mean, I was open to it if it felt like the right fit,
Yeah.
but it never did. And through that Y12SR group that I had been part of, I really started to find that community and connection that I was really looking for, because I think that's a big part of spirituality for people, is just having that community. So I
Yeah.
found a lot of that in the yoga world. And if you get really into the weeds on yoga philosophy, there's also just a lot about, our connectedness with ourselves and with each other. And I think, if you asked me to define my spirituality, I would stumble over my words and maybe come up
Yeah.
with a sentence by the end
Me.
of it. But I think for me, that was enough. Just finding some place where I felt connected. I felt like I belonged. I felt like I could just give and receive freely with people that I trusted. And it just took trial and error, and it took kind of being willing to be vulnerable. And I
Yeah.
feel like yoga was just a really nice place for that exploration, and it just sort of blossomed from there.
It was the gateway.
Yep. I joke with people that there's definitely an alcoholic to woo-woo pipeline.
Oh yeah. I didn't think I was going to go on it, and then all of a sudden I was like, "Oh, I will explore this higher power thing that I'm so against in this very woo-woo way." And I was like, "Oh, I like this."
I was the same way. I was like, I'm not that girl. And in some ways I'm still not. I think on social media maybe we see some things a little blown out of proportion, but I do like meditating in the sun with incense and doing, all of these things, to me, they're just little acts of self-care. And so if that makes me woo-woo, I'm fine with it. But yeah, it was not on my bingo card.
Yeah. And I'm always kind of like, well, I always did like tarot card readings. I always liked like that kind of stuff. But I feel like now I'm like, oh, I have to meditate. And I'm like looking up sound baths in our area. Like, Ryan, we should do this for date night. Like, I'm like, oh, yeah, this sounds great. And I'm like, wow, who am I?
Right.
And I'm like, oh, I like it though. So for somebody who feels skeptical about spirituality on the journey, what's one way that you would tell them they could start exploring this side of healing without feeling like they're going to end up in some sort of situation where people are like, it's time to declare God as your only one. And like, because that was me. I was like, no, they say it's pick a higher power of yours, but I've been in that trap before.
I mean, I think the sky's the limit as far as that goes. If you're comfortable
Yeah.
with checking out a studio, if something like yoga might be of interest to you, go for it. Check out a couple. Sometimes the first one you go to, kind of like a therapist, just isn't the right fit. But you could also do things at home, kind of in the privacy of your own space. There's a lot of guided meditation apps, videos on YouTube. There's free yoga videos on YouTube if you wanted to explore kind of what that movement feels like in the body, just on your own without worrying about any judgment from other people. Maybe my cat judges me when I do yoga at home, but
They're very judgeful though, those cats.
but it is, I would say, just find your comfort zone and just explore around a little bit. I think a lot of us, when we were in our drinking time, felt really detached from our bodies and definitely detached from our thoughts. So I think just slowing that down and sitting with it can be really hard. So also be patient with yourself. Like, you're not going to meditate for 5 minutes and figure it all out in one sitting. It's a very gradual process. So, and a lot of times it's uncomfortable to really sit with yourself. So give yourself grace too.
Yeah. There can be the wonderful moments and there can be like I've had meditations where I was like panicking the whole way and I was like, something's up. But I was far enough along to kind of go, hey, something's up. That's not your normal response. And I had our first sound bath at the Sober Retreat and I was the only one bawling at the end of it. I really thought all the rest of you were going to be crying too. I thought we all had the same spiritual experience, but it was just me. But the sound bath at the retreat was it a little bit of a turning point for you to be like, what is this sound healing thing? What can I get into with this?
Yeah. So actually, the sound bath that you were referring to, that was my second that I had ever
Oh, okay.
attended. And we were very fortunate. We had a fantastic sound healer that
Oh,
facilitated ours.
amazing.
She was, I think her name was Natalie. She was fantastic. But I think there's something about just the lateral sound of the crystal bowls. There was just something about it that, even though I couldn't put my finger on it, was just so soothing. And it made it easy to sit still. I don't know about you, since you were crying, you were probably a little uncomfortable, but
The second one with you was much more enjoyable. That one like cracked some things open in me that needed to be cracked open. So I'm very grateful for it. I always tell people that's why I say kind of like look for those things that feel outside the box as far as healing goes or self-care, because you never know which ones are really gonna be the thing that makes you feel those emotions that you haven't been able to tap into yet. And I think that's kind of what happened. And I was like, oh, okay. And it was a good thing. Even though it sounds like, oh, I don't want to do that. I'm like, I wish I could do that again because that like fixed some
It's
things for a little
cathartic.
while. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like there's definitely those moments. For those of you who haven't been to a sound bath, there's usually some sort of intention setting or theme or something that, you'll be kind of thinking on during the process. And a lot of times it's just like the stars align. I think, Sarah, you had pulled like a tarot card that had already set the stage for.
Oh, yeah. I think it was like getting back in touch with your spirit guides. And so since then, you've become certified as a yoga instructor, correct?
Yes.
And certified as a sound healer as well. And this is what I love about Chelsea. Like she goes out and she does the thing. She's like, I'm going to get these certifications. I'm just going to go make it happen. And like before our podcast recording, she was even teaching a yoga class, and it's just like, so what type of sessions or offerings do you provide? Because I know you actually have some where people could connect with you online, right? Through the studio you work with?
Yeah. So my studio, most classes we offer hybrid, so there is the option to join on Zoom. Just a lot of people do. I
I
think it was
love
something
that.
that kind of stuck around after the pandemic. So I can give you the link and you can do whatever you need to do with that. Yeah. And that's something that I'm kind of hoping to grow a little bit too, because I think that those little third spaces that we really need in recovery, especially as women, they're hard to come by. It's hard to find people kind of in your neck of the woods that have the same ideals. I think that's why the retreats are so popular, because we get people together that are all, birds of a feather. So stay tuned.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely check out, and I'll link Chelsea's Instagram here too. Is it Yogini Chels or Chels Yogini?
Yogini Chels.
Okay. And I will for sure put that in, because go follow her. She's got some funny yoga stuff happening. It's not all serious yoga with Chelsea. And if you can do one of her online classes, because when you posted that, I was like, that's what I need. Because I live out in the boonies, as Chelsea knows. And there is a yoga lady out here, but I'll look at times and where she is, and I'm like, yeah, that's like when my family eats dinner, and that is 30 minutes away from me. So, I can make up every excuse in the world. So if there's an online option, I'm there. And I know I'm not the only one like that. And especially too, I don't feel like I'm good at yoga in quotation marks. And so if I can do it in the comfort of my own home and have the moans and groans that happen as I'm like in happy baby, then that's where I need to be. I was doing happy baby last night in my living room for my kids to be like, what is going on, mom? And I was like, I'm a happy baby. Just do your dinner chores. Let mom do her thing.
It's I don't think I could ever rename that pose. It's just so perfect.
It's the best. It is the best. And it's the best pose, in my opinion. But definitely look up Chelsea and go to those links so you can figure this out. Because I think between your story, which I think will resonate with many people, and just kind of that finding the spiritual path, because I know I tend to attract the people who are like, ugh, God and AA, that's not quite feeling right. So maybe doing an online yoga class with Chelsea at her studio would be a good fit, or even one of the other instructors. And so for a quick little wrap up, if you could go back and talk to yourself on one of your early day ones, what would you say?
I think I would tell myself that I'm really proud of myself. So I think that was the message that I needed to hear the most. I remember so many times where I felt like I had just been giving it everything that I had and it still wasn't enough. I still couldn't get it to stick. The people in my life were understandably a little bit critical of kind of where I was at and the decisions I was making. And I feel like there was just so much negative energy or feedback kind of coming my way that I think I needed someone to just sit down and say, you're doing a lot and I'm proud of you. I think that probably would have given me a little bit more pep in my steps. So that's probably what I would say.
That's perfect. And then to go with the theme of the No More Wasted Days podcast, what does No More Wasted Days mean to you now?
It means I get to go to bed at 8 p.m.
Yes.
No, all jokes aside, I do love going to bed at 8 p.m. I think you realize how much time is actually in a day when you are in recovery. The amount of things that I'm able to accomplish in a 24-hour period continues to amaze me. I have friends that are always like, how did you find time to go get a yoga certification and sound healing? And I'm like, do you realize my days used to feel like they lasted 3 hours? Like,
yeah, right?
Having a full 12 to 16 hours where I'm awake, I can do anything.
Yeah, no, I get the same thing from people with like, you do so much. And I'm like, there's a lot of time in a day. And I wanted time so bad when I was a drinker. I wish there was more time. I wish I had more time to do things. Well, I was wasting it drinking and being hungover. And I'm like, oh, there's the time. So, well, thank you so much for being on. It was great to sit down and see you and chat with you outside of just text.
Yeah. Thank you again for having me.
And I'll definitely drop those links in the show notes, so check those out. And if you haven't already, be sure to rate and review the podcast. Some people were asking me, how do you rate it on Spotify? You can leave a comment on Spotify, and then I can actually respond back to you, which is so awesome. Same thing on YouTube. But on Apple Podcasts, you can actually leave a review, and it means the world to me. It is the best way to support the podcast, and it's totally free. So check that out, and I will be in your ear in the next episode.